In Islamic theology, the Prophet Muhammad is considered al-insan al-kamil, which is the perfect man. He is the model par excellence to be imitated. He is the person that the more a Muslim is like him, the better off he is. So the Prophet Muhammad is revered today in the Islamic world as the primary model of human behavior.
Well, when Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, wiped out all the Jews from Saudi Arabia, there was 3 tribes, Banu Nadir, Banu Qurayda, Banu Qaynuqa. We were proudly studying this in school as Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, ordered the beheading of the Jews of Banu Qurayda and the women being taken as concubines. As soon as a child had pubic hair, he was beheaded. So the Jewish population was either extradited or beheaded. The story of Rabbi Qanina is a well-known documented story in Islam. Rabbi Qanina was tortured by the order of the Prophet of Islam himself. His eyes were put out. He was burned in order to confess where the Jewish tribes were hiding their goods, their gold and their silver and all those kind of things. And this is right from the Hadith. This inspired us as Palestinians, inspired us on fighting jihad against the Jews in Palestine.
Authoritative Islamic History, The Life of Muhammad, Sirat Rasulullah, by Muhammad bin Ishaq, edited by Abdul Malik bin Hisham, translated by Professor Alfred Guillaume. Then the Qurayza tribe surrendered, and the apostle confined them in Medina. Then the apostle went out to the market of Medina and dug trenches in it. Then he sent for them and struck off their heads in those trenches as they were brought out to him in batches. There were 600 or 700 in all, though some put the figure as high as 800 or 900.
Another example that may be even more chilling of the deleterious influence that Muhammad's example has upon the Islamic world was exemplified recently by an Egyptian leader of a radical Muslim party who wrote just recently that he couldn't believe that the beheadings in Iraq were being protested by Muslims. Weren't they aware that the Prophet Muhammad himself beheaded between 600 and 900 men personally, members of the Jewish Qurayza tribe in Arabia, after he had defeated them? Didn't they realize that if the Prophet did it, then this was the proper way to behave? And so the mujahideen in Iraq, who were beheading people, are simply obeying the example of the Prophet. Now we can see then that since the Prophet Muhammad himself participated in many battles and raids, and did indeed perpetrate these beheadings, he ordered the assassination of several of his political opponents, and he behaved in general like a typical 7th century warlord. The problem is that when this is transferred to 21st century behavior, 21st century contexts of behavior, then what you get are terrorists. The Quran occupies a place that has no parallel in Western civilization. The Quran is considered by Muslims and by traditional Islamic theology to be dictated word for word by God himself, by Allah himself, through the angel Gabriel to the Prophet Muhammad. As a result, every word of it is the words of God himself. Every word of the Quran, unless it is canceled by another section of the Quran itself, is valid for all time and cannot be questioned, cannot be reformed, cannot be changed within an Islamic context. This means that moderate Muslims, peaceful Muslims, if they are sincere, have to reject entirely Quranic literalism. But to do so puts them outside the sphere of anything that has been considered Orthodox Islam throughout history. because to do so is to reject the very basic premise of Islam, that this is a book that is dictated by God and is a perfect copy of a perfect book, the al-Kitab, the mother of the book that has existed forever with Allah in heaven.
The Noble Koran, translated with parenthetical notes by Dr. Muhammad Taqi-ud-Din al-Hilali and Dr. Muhammad Muhsin Khan. Surah 98, verse 6. Verily, those who disbelieve in the religion of Islam, the Quran and Prophet Muhammad, from among the people of the Scripture, Jews and Christians, and al-Mushrikun, other disbelievers, will abide in the fire of hell. They are the worst of creatures.
So the Quran is simply a set of direct commandments or else narratives, descriptions, sometimes very distorted descriptions of Judaism and Christianity. Because of the normative nature of those commandments, the second important body for Islamic jurisprudence and for Islamic polity is the tradition of the Prophet, the Hadith.
Now, the Hadith are absolutely necessary to make any sense of the Quran, because Allah addresses Muhammad in the Quran and they talk about incidents in Muhammad's life, but they don't fill in the narrative details. So you have to go to the Hadith, the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad, in order to understand what's being said in the Quran and why. The Hadith are many, many volumes of traditions of the Prophet. Various Muslim scholars, beginning in the 8th century, which is some considerable time after the life of the Prophet Muhammad, who died in 632, they started to collect these traditions and to try, through various means, to winnow out the authentic ones from the inauthentic. From an Islamic standpoint, if something that Muhammad said or did is recorded in one of those books, then it has authority second only to the Quran. And in those books, there is a great deal that illuminates what the Quran says and how it is applicable to Muslims in the present.